The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is a complex and ongoing conflict that began in 2014 after Ukraine's then-president, Viktor Yanukovych, was ousted following widespread protests against his pro-Russian policies. This led to Russia annexing Crimea from Ukraine, which has been a major point of contention between the two countries. The conflict quickly escalated, with pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine declaring independence and fighting against Ukrainian government forces. Russia has been accused of providing support to the separatists, including military aid and personnel, but Russia denies these allegations. The conflict has resulted in thousands of deaths, displaced persons, and human rights violations. The conflict and the West, with many countries accusing Russia of aggression and interference in Ukraine's internal affairs. In summary, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is a complex and ongoing conflict that began in 2014 after Ukraine's then-president was ousted. The conflict has resulted in thousands of deaths, displaced persons, and human rights violations, and has strained relations between Russia and the West. What are the miscommunications between Ukraine and Russia to begun the war? The conflict between Ukraine and Russia is complex and has multiple underlying causes, including historical, cultural, economic, and geopolitical factors. However, some of the key miscommunications and misunderstandings that contributed to the conflict include historical tension. Ukraine has a long and complex history with Russia, with both countries sharing cultural, linguistic, and religious ties. However, there have also been historical tensions between the two countries, including disputes over territory and political influence. These tensions were amplified in the aftermath of the Soviet Union's collapse, when Ukraine declared its independence and sought closer ties with the West. Political instability. Ukraine has experienced significant political instability since its independence in 1991, with multiple changes in government and frequent protests. This instability has made it difficult for Ukraine to establish a clear and consistent foreign policy, which has created confusion and mistrust between Ukraine and Russia. Language and identity. Ukraine has a significant Russian-speaking population, particularly in the eastern and southern regions of the country. However, there have been tensions between Ukrainian and Russian speakers over issues of language and identity. Some Ukrainians view the use of Russian as a threat to Ukraine's independence and sovereignty, while some Russian speakers feel marginalized and discriminated against. Crimea. The annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014 was a major trigger for the conflict. Ukraine views Crimea as an integral part of its territory, while Russia argues that the annexation was necessary to protect Russian speakers and interests in the region. Miscommunication and propaganda. Both Ukraine and Russia have engaged in propaganda and disinformation campaigns, which have contributed to a climate of mistrust and misunderstanding between the two countries. There have also been instances of miscommunication and misinterpretation of statements and actions, which have exacerbated tensions. In summary, the miscommunications and misunderstandings between Ukraine and Russia that contributed to the conflict include historical tensions, political instability, language and identity issues, the annexation of Crimea, and propaganda and miscommunication.